Hey, everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Mark Young, author of Date Your Clients. Mark grew up surrounded by and immersed in the world of entrepreneurship, and he's seen all the good, bad, and ugly that entrepreneurship can be. I'm super excited because I'm a big believer in the idea that business can teach us a lot of lessons about success, people, and also about life in general. So, with that, welcome, Mark, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Well, I appreciate the invite, Brett. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. You have a really unique perspective, a unique background, and everything else, too. So, there's a lot of stuff I want to ask you about, but let's start off with your personal story. So, what is your background and how are you involved in business and entrepreneurship from such a young age?
Well, I'll say I was raised by a grandmother who was an immigrant to the United States. And this topic just came up in a conversation I was having yesterday because somebody was like, "Tell me about your childhood, your background." I'm like, "Wow, that's really getting pretty personal." And I laughed because it was talking about entrepreneurship. And I thought, that's really funny because when you grow up with an immigrant mindset, the family I came from was very much you don't hunt, you don't eat. Like that was just kind of the way things were. And having a job was great, but owning your destiny was better. And the one thing that every entrepreneur that listens to your call under or listens to your podcast understands is my grandmother would always use the phrase chicken today and feathers tomorrow as she's relating to the dinner table. Because entrepreneurship is by any stretch a nice linear path upward. It is a roller coaster with a few stall outs and the occasional cliffhanger and times that you just want to throw yourself off the cart just to end the ride, right? And and I'll say like there was so growing up in a family that really emphasized the importance of hard work and innovation was a big deal, and I really do attribute that a lot to being raised by a family of Italian immigrants who were like, no, like we work. And so I grew up in that family where it was you work. And my my father has been an entrepreneur for many years. My grandfather was an entrepreneur for many years. I literally grew up as a kid. I was raised, I told you, by my grandmother and grandfather, and they owned a plumbing company. So this is not entrepreneurship, they owned a, textiles factory or something. Like they owned a plumbing company. My grandpa was a plumber and my grandma ran the office. And you know what? During times that there was no school, we sat in a plumbing shop. Like my earliest memories of being at work were learning how to run the cash register. Like that was some of the stuff that you did. And as a kid, like it was fun to help make the bank deposits and goofy stuff like that. So I think to people who haven't had that experience, I say it's very similar to like, doctors grow up and raise doctors and lawyers grow up and raise lawyers, right? Because we tend to apprentice under the most important people in our lives. And my apprentices, my role models, my family, they were business owners and sometimes unsuccessful businesses and sometimes very successful businesses. And I'm proud to say that everyone in my family now has quote unquote made it. Like everybody's doing well. Like nobody's in the throes of fighting through the business. And it's like, growing up with that, like entrepreneurship is a rough road and everybody wants it. And a lot of people don't really understand what it's like. And my to message to entrepreneurs is it's a very lonely road, as you had, I think, alluded to earlier. And everybody else thinks you're just so lucky and you must be rich. And they have no idea how closely you log into the bank every morning to check the balance. They have no idea what staffing feels like. They have no idea what it's like to get a text message or a phone call at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. So it's really lucky.
Yeah,
It's
that's it. I mean, I couldn't have said that better. I'll tell you, you hit so many key points there because it's so true. I liken it a lot of times to athletics, right? So, you see Jalen Hurts throw a touchdown pass, you're like, wow, what a gifted athlete. Like this guy, he wins a Super Bowl and this is great. Nobody
Trains 12
sees.
hours a day.
Yeah, and nobody sees that this guy was like working, 6, 7, 8 hours a day when everybody else was on the couch, eating chips, watching TV.
Yep.
Rain, shine, injury, like it doesn't matter. Like working, working, working your entire life and career to get to that point. Now, if you told people in advance, this is what you're going to get if you do it, you might get some people to sign up for it because it's a pretty cool life. But for every one of him, there's 500 other guys that worked almost as hard or just as hard, but just didn't quite make it.
Yeah.
And with entrepreneurship, it's so true. In my own business, the roller coaster is definitely the analogy I think of. I don't know if you've ever seen. I might be dating myself a little bit, but if you ever saw the movie Parenthood, Steve Martin.
Yep.
So the grandmother says at one point they're talking about kids, but it's and family, but it's essentially the same idea.
Yeah.
She says, so people go to the fairground or whatever, and they go on the merry-go-round. That just goes around. It's nothing. She's like,
Hmm.
I always prefer the roller coaster. You get more out of it. And it's exactly what it is with entrepreneurship. Like you will have
100%.
those moments where everybody's like, "Oh, you're so lucky because you get to control your own time." And yes, but I also never unplug from the business. It's also with me 24/7. It's with me when I go to bed. It's with me when I wake up. And like you said, you have all the fears, all the concerns, all the other things that you need to manage. So it can be amazing, but it can also be mind-numbingly frustrating and like you said, days where you're just like, I want to just jump off the cart and
Yeah.
just go back to the corporate life and do that. So,
Well, I'll tell you
um,
this. I I did the corporate life for quite a while, so I've stood on both sides of that channel. And I'll say this to the people who work in the corporate life, they also are getting the phone calls at 10 o'clock at night and so on and so forth. So I don't I don't miss that because I don't work harder now than I did then. I work differently. But
yeah,
what I will say to that is I love and thank you, by the way, for running a podcast like this that speaks to entrepreneurs, because I think entrepreneurs by their very nature get very isolated, and because part of it is because relationships suffer because they're married to the business, um, and that's a problem in and of itself. But aside from that, what I'll say is that I think entrepreneurs are looking for community and don't know where to find good community. And for a lot of people who go start their own businesses, they start to separate themselves from their former peer group because we're not the same anymore. And the friends I went to college with and the friends that I've had throughout adulthood, it's like there's only maybe two or three of them total that we can actually have a real conversation about what's going on in life, because the rest I still am very close with and I love them dearly, but there's just facets of my life that they just don't understand anymore. Like I've been running my own businesses for 10 plus years now, and they see is the highlight reel because I'm at a conference in London, and oh my gosh, it's so lucky that you travel so much. I'm like, no, literally I'm doing this podcast right now from a hotel in Tampa because I have a meeting this afternoon, so I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do today. And that's fine, but again, it's I think entrepreneurs having the space to come together and have the conversations and share the frustrations and get the tips, and I'll use this word and just say that they get seen, because it's a lonely job. No one in your company understands what you go through. No, there's only one person at the top, and your job is to make everybody else feel better about theirs. But no one cares that you're stressed, and even if they do, it's sympathy, not empathy. And these types of channels that you create and other people create, I think really help entrepreneurs feel justified, like really just feel seen and feel heard. So thank you for what you do.
yeah, absolutely, and really well said. I mean, that's precisely my like inspiration for wanting to start it is because through my own journey, that's the exact experience I had. I had people that I was close to, and even if we can discuss things and they care about me, they can't relate to what it is that I'm going through. They can't relate to what it is to have to do it. And my own wife, you know, she is a teacher. So her, her job, she loves it and she's really good at it and all these other things, but she can't understand what it takes to be able to do it in the same way that I do, even though we share the same family and house every day.
Yep.
So it's
My ex,
impossible for friends to feel that way, or to
yeah,
understand it.
my ex was the same way, and it was a frustration because I don't leave work at 5 o'clock. Like I don't get that option. Like I'm not going to be home at 5 o'clock every day. I'm not going to like don't hold dinner for me because there are some days that I'm just not going to do that. And it's not a deprioritize. It's literally just it's not a deprioritize. It's just there's competing priorities.
Yeah.
And
And
for entrepreneurs, it's a balance of how do I make sure that you know I love you, but at the same time understand that to give you what you want right now means that everything else collapses in my world. Like how
well,
do we balance those two things?
that's the challenge. I mean, it is a livelihood thing. It's different if you're financially independent and your business is a hobby that you're doing for fun. But if you rely on it for the
Right.
income that it generates, then you don't really have a choice because, like you said, if you don't keep the lights on, you don't keep the gears turning, it stops.
I
And
remember making the statement. I'm going to interrupt you because I remember making the statement
yeah,
one time, when we got into an argument about it. And I remember saying, I know you're frustrated because I'm not around all the time, but boy, do you enjoy the lifestyle it affords. like, like you're okay with first class everything, but you don't get that and home for dinner at 5 o'clock. There's a harmony, but both aren't existing now. And to an
yeah,
entrepreneur, there's always this mindset of just give me a couple years and I'll be there because I just have to get past this stage. And my advice to the entrepreneur is like that stage will never end unless you make it end. And there is a point that you decide how much is enough.
yeah. Yeah, no, and I 100% agree with that too. And I think that, that loneliness element of it, and the feeling that sometimes, if you're going through a difficult time with what you're doing, that it appears like every other entrepreneur around you seems so successful. And that's the other reason it's so important to have that validation, that community, and that voice, because people need to understand that no. I mean, I've talked to people in such a wide range of industries, success levels, all kinds of stuff. And I can tell you that without question, the same theme comes up over and over and over again. It was never a straight and narrow path for anybody who did it.
Ever.
They were always on the verge of a nervous breakdown a couple of times, didn't know if they could pay the mortgage. And then, 6 months later, you're flying first class and taking vacations and stuff like that. And so it's a labor of love for sure. And you just have to have a strong stomach. So I know you also have a background in psychology. I'm curious, what got you interested in that?
Yeah, I've got a weird background, Brett. So I was a business owner at 16, and actually ran that business until I was 23. I did the slow route through undergrad, and then I went back and I actually my first full time job working for somebody else was actually as I worked in an accounting office for a nonprofit, because I'd taken an accounting class in high school and liked it and was smart enough to figure out what to do. And then I was like, wow, accounting, I'm really good at accounting. I'm going to do accounting. So I went back and got an MBA and was like, okay. And then I'm doing accounting. I'm like, I really don't love doing this. Like, this kind of sucks, right? Like, my personality is not meant to be an accountant, but I'm good at it. And I'm like, okay, but if you're good at something, does that mean that's your life's journey? And I will say that, and I'll liken this to a lot of entrepreneurs, because one of the things that happens with a lot of entrepreneurs is they're good at a lot of things. And while that's a gift, it's also a curse. And I remember my dad having a conversation with me when I was young and feeling defeated about something. And, he's like, look, he goes, you're going to have a problem. And he said, you're very talented, you're very gifted, you're a very smart young man, and that is going to open a lot of doors for you. The biggest problem you're going to have is choosing, because
Mhm.
you can't excel at all of them. Like picking what you're good at doesn't mean that's what you should be doing. What you should be doing is only what you are good at. Like, or what is it that only you can do? What is your superpower? And and that's a struggle, I'll say, in entrepreneurship also. And I'll get to the psychology thing, but that's a struggle in entrepreneurship also. And it makes me think, because I'm constantly telling my team, like, I hire people not because I don't know how to do things. I hire people because there are things that I don't need to be doing, because there are things in the business that only I can do.
Yeah.
In a meeting with my VP team yesterday, we were going through some of this, and I'm like, guys, like, my job as the visionary of this business is to set the culture, to network, to work and constantly work our high level relationships in the industry, to follow trends, to do the things that only I have visibility to, or only my relationships are going to do. You can't have my relationships for me. They're only mine.
Mhm.
You those are things that I can't hire somebody to do. So those are the things where my time needs to be spent, because I can hire somebody to build a website. I can hire somebody to proofread. I can hire somebody to write content. I can't hire somebody to foster my relationships. So every minute that I spend writing content is a minute I'm not dealing with a relationship, and that's where we struggle. And I think that's where every entrepreneur struggles, because it's easy, to go do the bank deposits yourself. And it's easy to do your own calendar scheduling. And it's easy to do this stuff. And I guarantee you, to anyone who's listening to this podcast, I assure you, take a drink if you've ever said this. It's faster if I just do it myself. And sure, absolutely. You started the place. You have more experience at it than anyone else in the building. It's faster if you do it yourself. Is it the best use of your time? So, that being said, I learned that accounting wasn't for me, because I'm like, yes, I'm good at it, but it's not the thing that I'm greatest at in the world. And it's certainly not something that no one else is good at. And I, I decided to go do something totally different. And I started teaching uh, at a college adjunct in the evenings. And my man, did I love teaching. And in the meanwhile, I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to get a degree and study clinical psychology. So while I was teaching and while I was working as accountant during the day, I went back and got a master's degree in clinical psych, and then started doing part-time practice, which I loved, by the way. Um, and teaching was something I really liked. I ended up leaving my accounting job, and I started working doing operations, strangely, at an advertising agency. So it was kind of an accounting, but it was more of like software install, working on that. And I'm like, all right, I get it. I did it for a little while because it was fun and it used my operations skills, but I was still teaching. And I'm like, man, I really want to go in front of a classroom full time. Like, this is what I want. So I ended up going into education full time. And that clinical psych degree, my gosh, like, came in handy every day. And then moved from there into the corporate world of education, which is a much dirtier side than the classroom, I assure you. So I taught at a few different colleges and universities over the years and loved it, and then was given the opportunity to actually move up, and I was a campus president for a school. And then I ended up getting recruited into a large private owned college and university group that had campuses all over the nation. And I moved into a senior VP and then into a COO role at that organization. It was like, so I went from being the COO at a $500 million organization, and then one day was like, no, it's like, I don't like this. It's too bureaucratic. People are getting hurt, and I don't have enough control over how to fix these problems. And it's like, and the one thing I will say is, like, I always use the phrase lead with passion,
Mhm.
and my passion is people. And any way that I can help people and make their lives better. And I just didn't feel like I was doing that anymore, because it became so corporate. I quit that job, and you're staring at the guy that you got today. It was a bumpy road, but entrepreneurship is a way that I lean on my accounting skills, and I lean on my teaching skills, and I lean on my psych skills. Like I look back at, um, I've got an MBA, I told you, and then the clinical psych degree. I also went back and earned a master's in theology, earned a master's in nonprofit administration, and then got a doctorate in educational leadership. And it's funny to me because like all of these pieces, there's no wasted experience I've ever had as an entrepreneur. Every single thing I've ever touched throughout my career, whether that was in a classroom or in a boardroom or, in a therapy room, every single one of them feeds into what I do today. And today, maybe I'm talking about consumer psychology more than, family therapy, but it all matters. And to an entrepreneur, I think that there is an element of everybody realizing that there is no piece wasted of your past.
Yeah, I actually love that perspective, and I fully agree. I've done things throughout my career where in the moment I didn't understand it. When I got to a point where I was disenchanted with it, I said, geez, I don't know if this was just a waste of time. And then a couple of years later, I'll be doing something else and I'll realize, wait a minute, I'm drawing on that experience that I learned there. And these are the lessons that I learned, and it's making me better at what I'm doing now because I haven't forgotten any of those lessons. I haven't, um, it's not like it was a waste. It was just a stepping stone in the path to where I'm going. And to one of your earlier points, entrepreneurs, we're possibility people, right? So if we have a lot of skills, that is the blessing and the curse, is the fact that we feel like, oh, I could do that, and I could do that, and I could do that. I coach a lot of business owners, and one of the things that I find as one of the most common problems is the ability to narrow things down, focus, and choose.
Yeah.
Because people have so many ideas, whether they're talking about, um, you know, deciding who their target market is, or whatever their product or service offerings are going to be, or whatever else. And it's amazing to me because so many people have a hard time. And from the outside, you look at it and you say to yourself, well, geez, there's no way you're going to build these four successful businesses concurrently. Like you got to pick one, build that, and then you can expand if you want. But the fact of the matter is, they can't decide. And I think that those are both super important lessons and takeaways from that whole experience and journey. So you wrote a book. It's called Date Your Clients. What inspired you to write it, and what's it all about?
I laugh every time I hear that title, Brett. Um,
Me
because
too. I thought it was really cool.
well, the funny thing is like I tend to be a little bit provocative in the way I talk, right? Because I believe in pattern interrupts, and that's the psychology of things. Like if I told you the book was called, Good Business, you'd be like, oh, nice. I'd say date your clients, and there's this like what did you just say? Like I don't think we're supposed to do that, right? And really, if I can, I'll draw a thread through all the loops here and say, date your clients is very much a conversation. It's a juxtaposition about your professional relationships and your personal relationships, and actually, it is a conversation about how no lesson you've ever learned is lost, because everything you've ever dealt with in life matters if you learn how to appropriately apply it to a different situation, what we call transferable skills. So, as an example, like the entire book started as a meeting with a marketing director at a client of mine's office, at a client's office, and I'm trying to explain to her. She's like, "Well, I don't think our TV marketing is working." And by the way, we were not doing their TV marketing. And she's like, I don't think our TV marketing is working. And I'm just like, why do you say that? And she's like, the conversions are just way down. We've got such a high bounce rate on our website, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, but if TV is working based on the amount of traffic that's going to your website. If you're not converting and you're high bouncing, there's a problem with your website, not your TV. And I'm like, let's go look at your website. And she goes to we open the website on the conference room screen. And when we open it, we look at it, and I'm like, good God in heaven, like I mean, her name was Fran, and I'm like, Fran, like, literally, there is nothing that I could possibly wonder about you after reading your homepage. Like, your homepage is an endless scroll of things about your company. Like, literally everything I could possibly know, from product details to pricing to the history of the company to the science, like everything is on your homepage. That's why you have such a high bounce rate, because bounce rate by definition means people went to your homepage, then left your site. Why would I click anything? I said, it's kind of like a dating profile. All I do on my dating profile is put my 5 best pictures and a little bit of things that make me interesting, right? I love candlelight dinners. I love long walks on the beach. I love talking about, migration of squirrels, like whatever. Like, I put a few interesting things about myself. The goal of my dating profile is to make them swipe right. That's
Mhm.
all it's about. That's all the profile is there for, to make me look interesting, to get a click through. And I went, your website is the same way, Fran. Put some images up there that make somebody want to learn more, and put a learn more button, because you have no idea. You can't even heat map this homepage to find out what they're interested in, because it's just one big scroll. And she's like, no, I don't think that's it. I'm like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding. So I kind of laughed. I was like, all right. I said, well, tell you what, I'm going to go back to the office. I'm going to write some of this down for you, because maybe if you mull it over, it'll make a little more sense to you. So I sent her an email a little while later, but before I sent the email, I actually, read it to my agency director at the time. And I was like, Jose, like, listen to this real quick. And I read him this, and he's like, boss, like, that's not an email. He's like, you just wrote a white paper. And he's like, that's good stuff. And he's like, we should use that as a lead magnet. I'm like, well, that's interesting. Like, okay. And he's like, keep writing. And that's how Date Your Clients happened, Brett. I kept writing.
Yeah.
It was an email to a client that turned into about 350 pages.
That is amazing.
Isn't that
I mean,
funny?
what, yeah, it is, but sometimes you just never know where the inspiration is going to come from, or where you'll find a thing that connects with a need in a way that maybe you didn't even intend to do, but then you find that that's where it is. And certainly, look, it's a really novel and cool concept, and it's intuitively so understandable, because everybody understands what the process you go through when you're dating. And the fact of the matter is, as you mentioned before, right, relationships are relationships. I mean, they're ultimately the underpinning of everything. So
Absolutely.
um so do you see a connection between dating or romantic relationships and business? Where do you see sort of the relationship connections there?
Well, so chapter by chapter, we actually walk through in the book. It's kind of a fun one. It's again, it's a very snarky, almost sarcastic read. What's fun to me is, like, even clients of mine who read it, because at that point, like, you better be living up to the expectation. And I've had clients who read it and were like, Mark, like, I hate reading business books because they all seem so dry. This was a blast. Like, I laughed through the book at some of the stories that you're sharing and some of the nonsense. But, like, every single chapter is a juxtaposition between something that happens in business versus something that happens in dating. So, for instance, the first chapter of the book, which anybody can go download at dateyourclients.com, it's available to go download. But the whole thing is, make them swipe right. Like, how is your website? What is your profile to the world look like? If someone were to look you up, what is it they're going to find? I went on a date recently. I'm single right now, and literally, I'm not joking. This girl ended up looking me up, finding me online, bought my book and read it before our first date. And she's like, "Well, I wasn't sure I was going to tell you this or not, but I read your book." And I was like, oh, okay. So you literally have all these stories about me that I've never told you. I'm like, that's kind of weird, actually. Um, but chapter by chapter, we talk about, what does the first date look like? And the same thing when you're going to meet up with a client. What do? To you, it's a Tuesday, right? Because you meet clients every day. To them, it's the first impression.
Mhm.
Like, what are you doing to prepare? What are you learning about this person? What are you doing to walk into this meeting and be prepared for it? Same way, even when you and I talked, even before this podcast launches, you're like, well, before we record, do you have any questions for me? And I'm like, yes. What is the expectation of your audience? Who is your audience? How can I make sure that anything I say is helping them and not just some random conversation that you and I are having face to face and having never met before? Like, what is that? And we go through everything from what happens when you get into the first fight. Like, you're going to disagree with a client. How do you resolve conflict? We go through, meeting the parents, which I compare to the buying committee, because you may meet with the operations guy who falls in love and wants to work with you, but then the CEO walks in the room and you're like, okay, I have to start all over again, because having a relationship with you is fine, but if your parents hate me, this is a deal breaker. Like, I got to start the sale all over again. Um, and having a relationship, if your wife's parents hated you, it would affect every day of your marriage. And if you sign a contract with a client, but the CEO dislikes you, but the COO got you in, like, you're running uphill again. Like, you're always going to be in this pressured moment of always under speculation, constantly feeling that every move you make is in danger of a breakup. All of that stuff is parallel. All of it is parallel. So we kind of walk through some of the funny stuff about dating, because dating can be funny. But we talk about breakups. We talk about one night stands. Like, who's the fling that crossed your path, and how did that affect you? The same way that we've all courted that client who we had all of our hopes up for and then ghosted us. Right? I've got a list of people who I literally have even presented to my team and said, by the way, I've got this whole pad full of new business opportunities I'm following up on. And some of the people, I was just reviewing it yesterday, and I'm like, I haven't heard back from this person in 9 months. Like, I thought it was such a signed deal.
Yeah.
9 months go by and I never hear from the person. I got a text message this morning from a guy that I had talked to 6 months ago, gave him some really solid business advice, walked him through a bunch of stuff. He was hot and heavy. We're going to move forward. And he texted me this morning about, hey, can I run an idea by you? Sure. Like, whatever. But at the time, I got ghosted. Like, you left me on red. And I was like, wait a minute, what's just going on here? So the joke for me is, all of those things are fair game in relationships. And the biggest thing that I'll say, two things. The one that I will say is that any type of relationship is about setting expectations, because you're only going to be disappointed if you thought you were going to get something out of me that didn't happen. So setting up expectations is the way to avoid disappointment and conflict. And I talk to my team about it all the time. And that is this idea that as long as we tell the client what to expect, the client's not upset with us. If we tell the client we meet every other week, that's fine. But if we just put a bi-weekly meeting on the calendar and the client's like, well, aren't we meeting weekly? The last place I worked with, we met every week. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like the last boyfriend brought me flowers on Fridays and you don't, so you're bad. And so I go through that. But the biggest thing that I'll put out there, Brett, and the entire summary of that book is, make sure that everything that's going on in your life is focused on relationships and not transactions. Because every client relationship, every customer relationship, everything is about a relationship. And if you make it transactional, you will fail. Because people are people. And we all want that. I had a doctor's appointment yesterday morning, and I called in the morning to cancel it, and no one answered the telephone. So I went through their crazy push this number, whatever, and I primero dos, and like, went through this entire voicemail thing. And literally it left me in a callback during normal business hours. I couldn't leave a number to cancel, but my appointment was the first appointment of the day. And then 20 minutes after that, I got a phone call from them, and the woman on the telephone was so rude to me. And she's calling, you missed your appointment. I said, I did. I tried calling you to tell you that I was double booked and I'm really sorry, but I tried to call you and I'm like, I pushed all, well, you need to call during business hours. I'm like, my appointment was at 9 o'clock and you open at 9 o'clock and I had a 9 o'clock meeting that I couldn't reschedule. Like, I've tried calling you. Yeah, whatever. I'm just going to cancel it. And she hung up and I'm like, now you've
Oh,
lost a customer
yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go give you a terrible review on Google.
Yeah.
Like, why is this so transactional to you?
No, it's funny you bring that up though, because being in the digital marketing space for a lot of years, everything is so transactional, and we've gotten to a point where now we're so connected through technology, that we actually, have de-emphasized relationships so much.
Too
And one of the
much.
things that I was a big believer in, and it was a lesson I learned the hard way, because I was, in the industry I'm in or was in, we would do these events maybe once, twice a year where we could all get together because the network of guys that I work with pretty much all over the world. And so they would run these events, and it was our one opportunity to get together. Otherwise, we see each other on Skype and all that other stuff, and that's really it.
Yep.
And we, promote each other's products and all these kinds of things. But um, the funny thing is, the very first time that there was an event, one of my better colleagues was really pushing me to go. And I said, look, I got to buy a plane ticket. I got to get a hotel room. I got to fly all the way down there. I got to burn 3 days of my time. I could sit here behind the computer. I could get a lot more stuff done. He said, trust me, come to the event. He's like, you're going to really enjoy it. So I went to the event. And what I realized, being at the event live in person, seeing other people, having conversations with them, shaking their hand, having a beer at happy hour, all that stuff is 1,000 times more valuable than a million Skype messages. And I completely missed the mark on that. Some of these guys would go to all these events, and I'm like, I don't get it. They're wasting so much time. They're going to all these events, but it's all about relationships, because at the end of the day, right, that's all business is anyway. I mean, it's
Yep.
really all anything is. It's the quality of your relationships determines the quality of all the things that you're doing. And so I fully agree with that. And I think it's a lesson that in nowadays time, especially with all the technology, in a lot of cases it's been lost or at least forgotten about. And at the end of the day, when you get back around to, I'll tell you a funny story, just a quick one from my corporate life. So I was in staffing for a few years when I was younger, and I'll never forget the day that I realized this wasn't the right company for me. So I set a client appointment, and my boss would come around. He was a regional boss, so he would come around every few weeks or whatever, and then he'd go with you to your client visits. So he comes to me with one of my client visits. We go in the office. I'm a Red Sox fan. My client was Mets fan. So I walk in, I see her Mets thing. I said, "Oh, I gotta leave. I can't even do business with you. I mean, you're a Mets fan." There's pictures of her kids. We start talking about this. So we have a nice conversation, talk a little bit of business at the end. We start walking out. We're on the way back to the car. My boss looks at me and he goes, "Dude, you gotta cut all the small talk." He goes, "People don't care about any of that stuff. All they want to know is like, do you have any talent that like we can recruit?" And I knew in that moment, first of all, he didn't know what the hell he was talking about.
Yep.
Second of all, if you're transactional, I would call people that were hiring managers that would tell me, "You are the 10th call I've gotten today," and it was lunchtime. So what's differentiating me? The fact that I've got like the franchise on the best talent in the area? I don't. Anybody else can get the same candidates I can.
Correct.
It's the relationship. It's the fact that
100%.
this woman wants to take 20 minutes out of her day to small talk with me about her life, as opposed to being stuck in her, accounting office doing accounting all day. And he completely didn't even get it. And I was like, wow, all right. But anyway, it's just a funny story. I mean, that even
It's
predates all
100%
the
true.
internet stuff. But yeah, it's
It's
crazy.
100% true. And I'll tell you what, that what we're talking about is the word proximity. And it's something that actually came up for me. And I'll say I was talking to somebody yesterday, in fact, and this idea that my business grew exponentially when I got out from behind the desk. And sitting behind the desk and sending emails and doing the work and so on and so forth has its place in my life.
Yep.
But when I actually started going out and making relationships and talking to people and having the beer at happy hour and so on and so forth, it's like you find people who just like you, and when they have a need, you're the person they call, or they're when a contact of theirs has a need, they recommend that they call you because they know you, they trust you. There's safety in that. And I was at a Tony Robbins conference last year, and it's funny because like I've never been a big giant Tony Robbins fan, but the guy's legit.
Mhm.
And he used the word proximity. And it was, you ever have a concept in your head and then someone else actually puts it to words and you're like, yes, that's what I've been wanting to say. Those are the words that wouldn't come to me, but the concept is the same. And in talking yesterday with my team, I made the comment about proximity. I'm like, I'm only in the office probably 50% of the time. Like my office door is closed and my team has to learn how to function without me. And I'm like, and it's going to get worse because I'm a big fan of proximity, because proximity is what puts me in the rooms.
Yep.
And the more I can be in the rooms and near the people and build relationships and have those types of moments, the better we all are. Like we are all better for it.
Yeah, no
Um,
doubt. I mean,
and because of that, like I want to emphasize to your audience that the relationships and the proximity to the people. I'm out. I mentioned to you, I'm out here in Tampa right now. I drove 4 hours last night just to come to a meeting with a potential client to have knees to knees time. Sure, I could have absolutely held a Zoom call with her. And 1 hour on a Zoom call may have been a really nice meeting. But driving 4 hours and paying for a hotel room last night and then coming to, going and having lunch with her this afternoon and then driving another 4 hours home is, yeah, I put in an entire day's investment, plus the cost of the drive and everything else. And it's worth it. Because even if she doesn't turn into a client, it's a relationship built and she felt valued. And if I can give that value to somebody and let them know that they were important enough for me to drive across the state to spend face to face time, that's worth it to me.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, it's one of the things I truly love about podcasting is the fact that I get to meet fascinating people all the
Yep.
time, and I get to have real conversations. I've been to a ton of conferences, collected business cards. I wouldn't even be comfortable reaching out to those people when I got back because I don't really know them. It was basically like I was told you're supposed to get business cards. So you shake a hand, you get a business card. You're like, okay, I mean, whatever. And I know there's a lot of tactics you can use and all that other stuff, but I don't like awkward, sort of forced interactions like that. With a podcast, I love the fact that we can talk and we can talk in depth about things. And I honestly feel like every single guest I've ever talked to, I could reach out to. They would remember who I am. I remember who they are,
Yeah.
and I think that that is right there the power of relationships and how important it is. So um all right, so where can people find your products, services, connect with you? I mean, is
Yeah.
it mostly just your book, or do you have other services that you can provide as well?
Well, I've got a lot of cool things. My primary business is actually I'm a marketing agency is my primary business. We actually work in direct to consumer and e-commerce marketing. Full suite. We do a bunch of different stuff. So we're kind of a little weird because we're not just digital or just social. We do a lot of things. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm MYOUNG at riseagency.com, which is RYZE. It's a little bit of an unusual spelling for people to remember. So I normally tell people on a podcast to reach me at mark at dateyourclients.com. That also goes directly to my inbox, and it's a lot easier to remember. They can actually look for my book online. Just like go to Amazon and order it. That's the easiest place. Just date your clients. And then I've got a new book coming out here, Brett, which is even more interesting to me. It's kind of my life song, and it's a book called Radical Generosity.
Nice.
Um, and radical generosity is all about living a life defined by impact, because as entrepreneurs and as business people, or just humans in general, we're all looking for some purpose at some level. And the reality is that all the money we can warehouse, or all the degrees that we can put behind our names, or all of the people we can meet, and so on and so forth. A friend and mentor of mine always uses the phrase that the currency of success is impact. And you're only successful if you've impacted lives. And the title of the book, Radical Generosity, kind of says it all. But it's not about the money. It's not about giving the money all away. It's about, where are you investing your time? Where are you investing your wisdom? How are you investing in your relationships? Like, are you being radically generous with all facets of who you are? Because a life well lived is a life given away. And I genuinely love every aspect of that. So that book will be coming out probably late March, I think, is when PR has that slated. So I encourage people to find me and find Radical Generosity also.
Awesome. Appreciate you sharing that. All right, and one last question I've got to ask because I think it's
Do it.
interesting and I always want to know what everyone's going to say. And that's, what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
Get back up one more time. Um, I will say, as a business owner and entrepreneur, defeat is inevitable. There will be days that it's, the many moods. If you've seen the meme with the person who, I'm amazing, oh my god, I'm terrible, this is so easy, I'm going bankrupt, like, and it's like a day in the life of an entrepreneur, right? And it's like, it's every single mood hits all at the same time. And for people who are starting off in business, I honestly tell you, stick with it. It's good, but the biggest piece of advice that I would give somebody is, don't think you know everything. Um, because entrepreneurship is a lonely road, we tend to think that no one understands the uniqueness of what we do. And the minute that I opened up to my own frustrations and my own the failures, to be honest with you, and shared the things that were going on in my business, entrepreneurs by their nature, successful people, let me say that, there's more collaboration at the top than there is competition. And when you reach out to an entrepreneur and say, look, I'm struggling, like, they get it. They want to help you back. So don't sit in your bubble. Don't pretend you know everything. Don't get defeated. Build relationships with other people who do understand your struggle, not your friends who tell you to just drop it and get a job. Um, the reality is that, and I'll tell you, man, like, if somebody's having that same struggle, Mark at dateyourclients.com, just like reach out. I'll talk through you. Like, I'll gladly give away any wisdom that I have to help somebody succeed.
It's awesome. Appreciate that. All right, with that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again so much, Mark, for sharing all your insights and great tips with us. Visit dateyourclients.com to get his book. It's a step-by-step juxtaposition between the relational skills required in dating and those required to be successful in business. So you're going to learn a lot, but you're also going to have a lot of fun while you're reading it. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And as always, remember, no matter what you want for your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.